We'll start with the Kenny Atkinson news, but first, a quick word from FanDuel. You guys know I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games. We do have a Game 7 tonight in the National Hockey League. We have a winner-take-all Game 3 in the Men's College World Series. And sports aren't sportsing like I want them to after tonight. That's a bummer, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/UCSS and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, the official sportsbook of the ultimate Cleveland sports show. You guys by now have seen the news. It was reported this morning by Adrian Wojnarowski that the Cleveland Cavaliers have hired Kenny Atkinson to be the team's new head coach. This comes on the heels of The Athletic reporting just an hour earlier that the two finalists were James Borrego and Kenny Atkinson, which we had all kind of known for the last couple of days. This has been a roller coaster ride. It's been about a month since the Cavs have fired J.B. Bickerstaff to reach this conclusion of Kenny Atkinson being the next head coach. He was previously on the Golden State bench. He's been an assistant there for the last few years. He's a former Nets head coach. He was with the Hawks earlier. The whole timing of this is interesting because, A, Kobe Altman initially said, well, we're not in a rush to have a coach before the draft.
Right.
The draft is on Wednesday. It was also interesting because, well, up until last week, and especially the middle of the week, all the momentum was in James Borrego's corner.
Seemed like it.
And then last Wednesday, the front office had meetings with Dan Gilbert. And then after that, we started seeing reports that the wind was now in the Kenny Atkinson sail. And you can read into that however you want. No one knows exactly what happened.
Let's go there. I mean, Borrego must have just absolutely bombed in his face-to-face with Dan, no?
Potentially, or whether or not they met face-to-face with Dan may have just wanted Kenny Atkinson. And when you're the owner of a basketball team or the owner of any team, you kind of get what you want. And to me, at least, I'm reading this as a Dan wanted Atkinson, Dan got Kenny Atkinson.
Yeah, but
and it's not a bad hire. We'll get
Dan into that.
But it's a good hire because Kenny Atkinson's a good coach. But I do look into this as Dan Gilbert wanted Kenny Atkinson, so Kenny Atkinson, therefore, is the head coach of the Cavs.
Mike, all the wind was blowing in Borrego's direction.
Very strongly.
I mean, I literally heard that the announcement could be made last week.
Yeah, we was on
Wednesday or Thursday.
Wednesday. I heard Wednesday mid-afternoon. It's coming today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we was on Borrego watch. For me, I see Kenny Atkinson, and I'm a dude who I said I liked him to start with. I thought that he would get the coaching job. It was the first name I threw out there. I just like the fact that, he has some coaching experience. I think one of the things Dan Gilbert looked at was I felt like he also felt like Kobe Altman didn't necessarily have a plan in order and thinking about this thing through all the way from start to finish. Because you look at it, Donovan Mitchell was in flux, right? They didn't know whether or not they wanted to bring JB back or not, right? It took them a long time to even get rid of JB.
Sure.
So if
a week, he just dangled in the breeze.
I used to work. I worked in corporate America, right? And I would have a person that reported directly to me. They could be on progressive discipline, or they could have some different things with attendance. And my boss is looking at me because they're like, well, if that person ain't showing up, what are you doing about it?
Right.
If that person ain't getting it done, what are you doing about it? And the longer you let those individuals stay around, it makes you look like you don't have your control and pulse on the organization.
Right.
So I think that hurt a little bit. And then I think Dan came in and said, you know what? Nah, I'm going to be more involved in this. I was cool on autopilot when it seemed like you guys have everything together. I think they go and make the move because I think he wanted more stability in a guy who's done it before, and he respects the fact that he spent that time with Golden State.
How concerned are you? I know the talent was an issue, and your record is what your roster is, but it's hard to say it was a big upgrade when you look at what JB's Now, granted, JB had better ingredients here, but you're talking about a guy that in 4 seasons, Mikey, I believe he's like 60 games over or below 500, maybe worse.
Kenny Atkinson?
Yeah.
Yeah, he took over an atrocious.
I know he did, and he turned it around.
72 games under 500.
That's a ton.
It's a lot of games.
So now, we cut him some slack because that roster, when he got to the Nets, was, I'm pretty sure they were getting some of those dudes from Rucker Park.
No,
but
it was a G League roster.
But the amazing thing was, the flip was I don't want to say it was, it wasn't timely, but I think they got in as the 8th seed, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe the 7th seed in his last year.
So he played 4 seasons as the head coach of the Nets.
Yeah.
His first was 2016-2017, completely rebuilding team.
Abysmal.
20-62. The next season, 28-54, so an 8-game improvement.
Good.
Third season, 42-40. They jumped 14 games.
Big jump.
And then they took a regression. He went from 42-40 to 28-34 in his final season.
Fired halfway or 3/4 the way through
60
it.
games in.
Yeah. What do you guys make of that?
I mean, for me, it's funny. I was joking with G. I said G got what he want coming into this. I think we all had the assumption that James Borrego was about to be the next head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think Kenny Atkinson is a good coach. I guess my only issue was about the process of how we got here. Because if this was Kobe Altman and his staff coming together, going through all these interviews, and then they decided on James Borrego, and then Dan Gilbert stepped in and said, yeah, I don't care what y'all decided on. I want Kenny Atkinson.
And that's what it looks like.
That's what it feels like, and that's what I have an issue with. It's not about Kenny Atkinson himself. I think Kenny Atkinson did himself some favors by going to Golden State, being under Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr comes from a system, the triangle offense, right? He played in it. He understands it. He took a form of that system, took it to Golden State, and won 4 championships.
Yeah.
So Kenny Atkinson, who's a defensive-minded head coach, has spent the last three or 4 years in Golden State with him, learning in this system. Cool. I can get on board with that. The other pro that I can see, Jarrett Allen and Caris LeVert gave him a ring and endorsement.
Yep.
We know that Donovan Mitchell and Jarrett Allen are like this. So that clearly tells me that Donovan Mitchell is on board with this as well.
Those are the dots I connect.
Those are the dots I connect. The only issue I have is the front office, the people that Dan hired, put in place, came to the conclusion that James Borrego was the guy. And because you felt differently about it, you said, no, I'm making you hire this guy. That's the only part of it that makes me uneasy.
Does it undermine Kobe to the point where he's the general manager puts his fingerprints on an organization 2 ways: draft and who he hires as the coach. Mm-hmm. Well, draft's been out of mix, really. Mm-hmm. He had a chance to put his fingerprints on this organization, and to me, I hope we get more information. I hope Kobe comes out and is actually transparent. Sometimes with these things, you never get the truth. If Dan called or face-to-face with Kobe and said, no, I know that this is your guy, but this is our guy.
Right.
Kobe's never going to say that.
Can't say that.
Can't say that. Dan might, but Dan is kind of a shadow owner now.
He's incognito right now.
He is. So we may never truly get the story for how this went down. And the problem with a lack of transparency is the media has blanks to fill in. And I know it's not our job to fill in what we don't know.
Right.
But that's where the opinion comes in. Yeah. When we're journalists, we are to report fact. In the absence of fact, we theorize. And sometimes that gray area, because I'm not kidding you.
You thinking what I'm thinking?
I am. And I put the same
my crystal ball.
Yeah, that's right.
My crystal ball, I see it.
So here's what happened. We were forced to fill in the blanks and to connect dots that we didn't know how got together.
Right.
I immediately said, because I got to tell you, I was shocked even this morning. I thought that we'd get the news of Borrego today or tomorrow. When I saw it, I immediately said, okay, so this is how this went down. This extension is going to be announced any moment, any day. He's staying here. Was there a backroom deal made between ownership or management and Donovan? Look, we've got to do everything we can to appease this guy. We know he came out last week. And there's a method to madness when a player does this. He came out and said, I don't want Jarrett Allen to be traded. We're buds.
And now you go get Jarrett Allen's coach who refused to play DeAndre
Thank you.
Jordan over him in New Jersey.
So now we automatically know, you really did give the keys to the castle to Donovan Mitchell. Now, I go back to Jim Donovan's take the day that JB was fired. You're making sweeping changes to appease a guy who's won exactly what? Remind me. And that's true. It's not Michael Jordan. It's not LeBron James. And we're seeing some pretty wholesale decisions that seem to be driven by Camp Donovan. That's fine. You better deliver. You better make it worthwhile. Don't give me another one-round win and out next year.
Yeah.
Like, we did a lot of things that you wanted. I think the JB thing made Donovan comfortable. Mm-hmm. I think if we keep Jarrett Allen around, I think that keeps Donovan comfortable. If we go with Borrego for the reasons we've theorized that we're going with Atkinson, then the evidence is mounting, and then Donovan stays here. You know, Dan has sold his soul before, and it did lead to one championship. So let's get a second one. I'm good with all of it. I mean, my bar isn't high. I just want another parade.
And what it tells me, in the words of Metro Boomin and Future, we don't trust you.
Yeah.
We don't trust you. Hey, look, you had a nice opportunity. You had your fingerprints all over the moves. You had the Donovan move. You made the decision to get rid of Laurie Marketing. You made the decision that Darius Garland was going to get this max extension. You made the decision to go get Strussi Niang. You made the decision on all those things. But what it tells me is Dan is back in the building.
Yeah, but here's the thing with
cooking.
that.
And I believe that draft pick is coming from Dan Gilbert as well.
You do?
Yes, I guarantee that draft pick. He's like, yeah, this is a two-part program. We're going to get the coach, and then I'm going to pick who this player is going to be, too.
That will be.
Now again,
I don't think he's that involved.
We're assuming, we're giving our opinion. We don't know anything to be fact, but let's just say like it is one of those, okay, he doesn't really trust Kobe to make that decision. I think as fans, we don't really trust Dan Gilbert to make that decision. Because every time Dan Gilbert has went out there and handpicked the coach,
hasn't gone well.
It hasn't gone well. Mm-hmm. Just David Blatt. So,
John
I mean,
Beeline was the all-time worst. I know a lot of people think Blatt was worse. I think Beeline was worse.
The only saving grace that Dan has, they just show you how powerful winning is.
He spend that bread.
He spend that bag when it gets down to the get down, and he also does one thing that's dynamic. He's won. Like, Dan Gilbert will do anything, including apologizing to LeBron James when they were on. They were on two different. They did not like each other.
No, you couldn't get the two of them in the same state. There was a real rift. But I always gave Dan credit because he swallowed his pride and said, "I need that one.
Yeah,
I need that one."
And
now there's another
time.
thing too. When this was probably my second to last or last year at ESPN, we did a deep dive on. There's two legacies of Dan Gilbert. There is the legacy with LeBron on the roster and the legacy without LeBron on the roster. Now, obviously, over the last 3 years, that legacy has got a little more shine on it. But his winning percentage without LeBron James on the roster as a Cavaliers owner was, I believe, .291.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's kind of wild.
Think about that.
Kind of wild.
So LeBron is sitting over here going, I see you making all these moves, but you haven't done it without me. And it wasn't just lean years, guys. The .291 winning percentage would have qualified as the lowest winning percentage for any pro sports team within the last decade of when we did that research. So you have two Dan Gilbert legacies. Acceptable and probably short of expectations, but a championship with LeBron on the roster, and an absolute dumpster fire with absolute no success without LeBron on the roster. So Dan could be looking at this, if he is, and he knows that's the mark against him, this is his opportunity to do something without LeBron James on the roster. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I give him credit. He wants to win. He spends the money, and I think he stepped up and got involved in this particular decision. But I'm still not sure he's in the building, so to speak.
No, he ain't showing up to 10 o'clock meetings, sales meetings.
No.
Get ready for the 10 o'clock sales meeting,
man.
How we doing on the east side sales?
Oh my God.
For me, I would really like to know. I would like to hear, Steve Kerr and his assessment and his opinion.
Well, he has glowing things to say
Kenny
about
Atkinson.
Oh, he loves
I got a chance to talk to Ethan Sands from Cleveland.com a couple times, and I wanted a coach in here that had a system and was good with player development, right? And when you talk about a system, we talked about this point earlier, the whole triangle offense, right? Steve Kerr comes from that triangle offense system. He won championships as a player.
Sure.
He took a form of that system with him to Golden State as a head coach after spending time with Popovich in San Antonio.
And won rings.
And he won rings with it,
Yeah.
right? Kenny Atkinson.
Now, he had an all-time great roster, too.
He did. Kenny Atkinson, you could say the first go-around really didn't do that great, but he did turn around the Brooklyn situation. So I'm cool with him spending the years under Steve Kerr, learning the things that he's learned, and then he's getting a second chance. I think everybody deserves a second chance.
I like that.
It's not about Kenny Atkinson. I think Kenny Atkinson has the opportunity to be successful here with the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs have a damn good roster. And if this is something that Donovan Mitchell signed off on, if he has a good relationship with Caris LeVert and Jarrett Allen, and we know that these players have a tight relationship, I'm cool with that too. Yeah. My only issue is of what it feels like. Because of everything that we read and it was reported on that they had settled on Borrego.
Right.
And the only reason Kenny Atkinson is the coach is because of Dan Gilbert. That just makes me uneasy.
No, it does me as well. Mikey has some basketball stuff. Before we do, we should try to get someone on from Golden State, a beat writer that can give us more on exactly Atkinson's role.
He was
under
the defensive
Kerr.
coordinator.
No, I know he was, but I'd like to hear someone who, their version of Jason Lloyd. Somebody that can go
we could do that.
deep in the weeds and let us know what kind of person we're getting, what kind of guy we're getting, how he worked with Steve Kerr. I've only heard Steve Kerr say unbelievably glowing things about him.
People love Atkinson. Like whether
Seems
or not,
to be a popular guy.
Whether or not this was a front office decision, a Dan decision, a collective decision, the Cavs are getting a really good basketball coach in Kenny Atkinson. I think at the end of the day, we can pick and choose and fill in the blanks, as you said. I thought it was a great way to put it. How we arrived at this conclusion of Kenny Atkinson.
Yeah.
The reality is that the Cavs are getting a coach that, although the resume may not look like a direct upgrade over JB Bickerstaff, has the potential to reinvigorate this offense in ways that JB didn't. I talked to, as soon as the news came out, I made 2 phone calls to guys who work in the league. And I was just like, hey, real quick, I spent a ton of time breaking down like Borrego stuff. I thought that was going to be the way they go. I spent way too much time watching 2021 Charlotte Hornets film. Now I got to go do it for the Nets and the Warriors, but like give me something real quick. And they both said almost the same thing. They go with the Cavs last season. They ran a primary offensive option, some sort of set, some sort of motion, and if it wasn't there, they'd back it out and go pick and roll.
I hate
talked
that.
about
That's
100
their-
times
that's
on
their
the show,
that's their
1,000
backfall.
times it was one offensive option afterwards. Well, if you go back to Kenny Atkinson days in Brooklyn, and Golden State did the same thing. So I know it wasn't his offense in Golden State, but they use the same principles. It's a motion-based offense that doesn't stop.
Right.
If your first option isn't there, it leads into a secondary option. It's a more complex offense
Yes.
than what we had seen in Cleveland the last couple of years. And you go back to what he did in Brooklyn. Once again, he was the defensive coordinator in Golden State, but he was in those rooms, in those discussions.
Sure.
Just because he's a defensive coordinator doesn't mean he has any say in the offense and didn't pick up things. If the first thing isn't there, then the second one comes around. If the second thing's not there, you go to a third option. Very rarely do you get into ISO situations or with 12 seconds on the shot clock. Hey, let's back it up and run a high pick and roll.
And that's what the Cavs offense
Exactly.
was
So
built
you're going to
upon.
see, regardless of whether it was Borrego, because Borrego had similar philosophies in that sense. Whether it was Borrego or now it is going to be Atkinson, we were going to see a complete offensive change from a schematic standpoint and from an execution standpoint. Secondly, in Brooklyn, specifically in Brooklyn, he revitalized D'Angelo Russell, and they always played with 2 guards who could play on and off. Now, we'll see if Darius and Donovan can work.
That's
in
what
that
I was going
sense.
to ask you.
And we'll see. He had D'Angelo Russell and a bunch of rotating cast guys. Spencer Dinwiddie was in there.
Yeah.
None of the guys he coached in Brooklyn, despite the fact they had success, D'Angelo Russell had the best season of his career in Brooklyn under Atkinson in this offense.
Yeah.
None of those guys have the talent level of Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland.
You're right.
So you would hope.
What do you think? Do you think he can make that work?
I have to look more into how he utilized those 2. I spent, no joke, 4 to 5 hours looking at Borrego stuff. I spent
Right.
about 4 to 5 minutes this morning looking at Atkinson stuff.
It's tough.
I really thought I was going Borrego, so I don't want to give you an answer. I'll dive into that
All
tonight.
right.
I'll have an answer tomorrow. But 2 numbers real quick that are going to make Cavs fans excited about this Atkinson hire. The offense under Bickerstaff was boring. It wasn't terrible, but it certainly was boring. In Brooklyn, he was the head coach for 4 seasons. They finished in the top 10 in pace all 4 seasons.
Oh, and that's
They
good.
finished first in pace his first year. They slowed down, but that's because they were terrible. The only chance they had to win was we have to score 140.
Right.
So they run.
Yeah.
He likes to run, so you'll see a more up-tempo offense.
What do you think
They
about that?
also
How
ranked-
that suits this roster?
With 2 bigs, you can't run. With 1 big, you can run.
Thank you.
There you go. The other thing, they ranked in the top 5 in threes in each of his 4 seasons. They like to run. They like to shoot. Spacing,
Mike,
running, and shooting.
So let me
are
ask
3
you this.
principles of his offense.
It's to me, the reason the Cavs offense is so difficult sometimes to create threes for players is because there's that lack of motion and movement, ball movement. I think that I don't know if it's a chicken or an egg thing. Like, do you shoot and make more threes because you're moving the ball around so effectively? And do you think that if he brings that ball movement offense here and we're swinging it around and there's a lot of options, that in theory should create space and more open shots, no?
It's hard to space the floor if you have 2 guys on the floor who can't shoot.
Because
Almost impossible.
There are ways to get more spacing, but it is hard. You saw the Boston Celtics play with Porzingis on the court.
Yes.
The entire paint is open because they have 5 guys on the perimeter.
I guess.
And you have to guard all 5. And Earl, hop in 1 sec. But if you have, for example, if Evan Mobley doesn't continue to improve as a shooter and you run it back with Jarrett Allen, you're not guarding those guys on the perimeter, which means you have 2 help defenders in the paint, which closes off driving lanes and just makes it more difficult. It closes the space. To answer your question, yes, ball movement helps with spacing and making shots. Having shooters who shoot more than 33, 34% from 3 also helps. And not going pick and roll heavy where everyone stands around. I don't believe that offense is sustainable to win at the highest levels. You look at Luka and the Mavs, that's the offense they played. When your role players shoot 60% from 3 in 3 playoff series, you're going to win everything.
You are.
If they don't shoot that, you're going to struggle against good defenses. We saw what happened against the Celtics. Or what were you saying?
I guess my question for you, what's your opinion on like how this will work out when it comes to player development? I mean, because another piece of this puzzle is the development of Evan Mobley, right?
Well, you know what? I'm glad you went there, Earl, because I honestly think that every time we have these discussions, regardless of who the coach is in the offseason, how are they going to make it to the next level? Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. Every single time it comes back to Evan Mobley's got to be a shooter. He's got to get a shot. And we heard Kobe in his breakout news conference after the season was over
say that they got lost.
Say that, look, we definitely prioritized winning now when Donovan came into the family, and I don't see why the two have to be, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Why can't you continue to develop Evan Mobley while you win? Now, I understand, more things are going to go through Donovan Mitchell, but there's an off season, and that's when those things are worked on, and because it was made a vocal priority of Kobe to get back to the development of Evan Mobley, because all these conversations always circle around to one thing. Well, Evan Mobley's got to he's got to become a better shooter.
Let me read you a word-for-word quote from Adrian Wojnarowski's article on the Cavs hiring Kenny Atkinson. And I quote from Woj. Cavaliers president of basketball operations Kobe Altman and general manager Mike Gansby are especially eager for Atkinson's reputable player development program to impact young center Evan Mobley. Notice he called him a center.
Yeah,
interesting. Very interesting.
I read that and it went right by me. I didn't really pull that out.
He has to develop. Atkinson is known. He made his whole coaching career. He was a player development guy first.
Sure.
His basis of his coaching acumen comes from being a player development guy. He spent years as a player development guy. And if you look at the Nets, when he was with the Nets, he developed Jarrett Allen into a serviceable player.
Yes.
Caris LeVert had his starts there. The best seasons of D'Angelo Russell's career. Remember, they traded D'Angelo Russell to Golden State as the get back in the Kevin Durant move.
Right.
Like, that's how well he was playing at that point. Now he fizzled out, has never been that player again. His track record as a player development coach is pretty impressive. Now, I'll have to go through and do some more digging to see if he's turned a non-shooter into a shooter, which is the question with Mobley.
Yes.
If he's playing the 4, if he plays the 5, it's maybe not as crucial because you can play with one non-shooter. If he's your 5 and he's your non-shooter, you can get away with it.
It's easier, yeah.
It's easier. You want him to shoot, though. At the end of the day, we all want him to shoot more. He shot 37% last year. He needs to shoot 37%.
It's not even the percentage, it's the volume.
Exactly.
And, Mike, let me ask you this. Do you think that because that was a great catch by you. I read it, went right over it. Didn't even stick out to me. Do you think that's Woj putting the word center in there, or do you think that's Woj repeating what he's heard from maybe Atkinson or others in the organization?
That's a good
Beats the
question.
hell out of me, man. I have no idea. Well, John Fanta's coming on in a few minutes, so we'll ask John Fanta, who, by the way, I have a great story to intro John when he gets on. I see him in the queue. John, you get audio. We'll get you in 2 minutes. Thrilled to have John on. But
he's awesome.
Yeah, it's a good hire. Whether it was a Dan move, whether it was a front office move, whether it was a collaborative, Kenny Atkinson's a good hire. When JB got fired, Jay, when he got fired a month ago, the first name connected to the job, in the same tweet that Woj put out saying, breaking, Cavs have fired JB Bickerstaff, name to watch, Kenny Atkinson.
Yeah.
A month later, the first guy that was linked to the job is the guy that got it.
Yeah, Woj is always on. And the other thing that Woj a lot of times won't write how he knows, but I know after reading him and working with him and knowing him that when he puts something in there like that, he knows. It's his reputation, and he's right way more than he's off. Even sometimes when he's off, it's not that he's wrong. It's just that he's just was off on that particular thing. But you're right. When that first came out and he wrote that, I said, okay, he connects the behind-the-scenes dots better than anyone. He knows about the connection between Allen and Mitchell. He knows about the connection between Atkinson and Allen and LeVert. And he knows how all those teeth on those wheels come together and move the machine. So, yeah, you're right. A month ago, we should have listened more to him than the reports that it was going to be Borrego.
Borrego was the second name connected. So
he was.
It was 1 and 2. Very last thoughts before we bring in John Fanta. Earl, fan or not a fan of the Atkinson hire?
I'm a fan of the Atkinson hire. It was just
1 to 10. 10, you love it. 1, you hate it.
1 to 10. I give it about a 7 right now.
I'm a 7 too. G?
Man, I like it like a give me that 8-5.
Oh, you love it.
Give me that. And by the way, we talk about shooting. Hey, man, I'm looking for the development of one 6'9" player that can shoot the basketball that we just refused to talk about.
No, go ahead and say the name.
Go ahead.
You heard
Get it out there.
You heard it. Monty
Say
Bates, let's get it ready to go, dog.
Say his
All right, I
name.
know we got to bring Fanta on, Fanta the homie, but if you saying that, man, watch Ty Jerome come back healthy. If Ty Jerome come back healthy, I think Ty Jerome going to finally make some noise this year for the Cavaliers as a backup point guard.
I love your consistency.
Ty Dollar Sign will play before Ty Jerome.
Hey, Earl, real quick.
Dollar Sign.
Our guy Mac Perry, who's been on the Ultimate Cavs show, he's been on Ultimate 216, puts out every bucket each player made this season. The video of Ty Jerome was 14 seconds long, just so you know. So that was the Ty Jerome highlight. He scored 5 points this year. Guys,